Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching The World Report. Let's first take a look at some of the top stories. US President Donald Trump has called the success of Chinese AI app DeepSeek a wake-up call for US tech companies. DeepSeek has become the top free app in the US, sparking a dip in US tech giant shares, wiping billions off their market value. Israel says that 8 of the hostages set to be freed in the first phase of the Gaza ceasefire deal are dead. Meanwhile, over 300,000 people have returned to northern Gaza as the UN warns that their needs remain immense. President Trump has signed several executive orders as he looks to reshape the military, along with a promise to build an Iron Dome defense system in America. DEI initiatives have been banned, 8,000 non-vaccinated service members will be reinstated, and officials will formulate a policy on transgender troops. Fighting in the Congolese city of Goma has intensified, with at least 17 deaths reported and hundreds injured. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has condemned the assault by Rwandan-backed M23 rebels in a call with the Democratic Republic of Congo's president. Hamas released a list of overnight that proved information on the status of the remaining 26 hostages. However, Israel has said that 8 of the hostages on the list are dead. Government spokesman David Mencer informed after matching the list with Israel's intelligence. Also, Hamas has released a video of the Israeli hostage Arbel Yahoud, whose release was unexpectedly cancelled in the last exchange. Let's look at this video and listen to what she has said.
הנשיא טראמפ, אני בסדר, מבקשת מכם לעשות הכל כדי שהפסקת האש תימשך, וכולנו החטופים נוכל לחזור הכי מהר שאפשר הביתה בריאים ושלמים, ושאסירי פלסטין יוכלו לחזור הביתה בשלום.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office announced Hamas has agreed to release Arbel Yahoud, female soldier Agam Berger, and one other hostage this Thursday, adding that 3 more hostages will be released in coming Sunday. The list and the video come after Israel opened the corridors for Palestinians to return to northern Gaza a day prior. This means that over 300,000 people have fled to northern Gaza, with the UN and government warning of immense needs to cater to the residents. Joining us first on this story, we have our correspondent Aditya Wadwan. Aditya, thank you for joining us. The hostages that have been the hostage list that's been released, 8 of those names are dead. Is this something that the Israeli military and Israeli government was expecting?
Well, absolutely, Josh. If you see, as you rightly pointed out, that from the list of 26 prisoners, Israeli prisoners who had to be freed by Hamas as part of this ceasefire deal, has not been followed properly, because agency and Mossad have been saying is that they have about 8 Israeli prisoners have been dead, and this as per the Israeli Defense Forces, this violates the agreements of the ceasefire deal that was scheduled to take place between both the sides, and which had to ensure that all the hostages, Israeli hostages, had to be safely returned to Israel, which hasn't happened. And on top of it, Donald Trump has already said that if all the Israeli hostages are not returned alive, all hell will break loose. So now it needs to be seen as to what further course of action Israel takes in this regard, because as we have seen, Israel had yesterday only, if we talk about Lebanon, Israel had bombarded in Lebanon, when some of the protesters who were holding the flags of Hezbollah were seen roaming around the streets. And the Israeli Defense Forces have clearly said that until and unless the Lebanese army steps in to stop the resurgence of Hezbollah, they would not stop attacking Lebanon. So this, as far as the Israeli hostages are also concerned, the situation is very, very disturbing at the moment, because 8, as per the Mossad, which is Israel's spy agency, 8 people have died in Hamas captivity. Now it needs to be seen from now here on how this situation, this entire ceasefire deal progresses. Yes, George, back to you in the studio.
Also joining us to discuss this topic, we have Yossi Kapawasa, the former head of research at the IDF Military Intelligence Division. Yossi, is this moment where the confirmation of 8 dead hostages, is this being felt in Israel at the moment? And also, is this something that you think can provide clarity for those family members who are unsure for certain whether their family members were dead?
Yeah, well, good afternoon. Yes, I think that that was what we expected. The assessment before the deal was that 8 out of the 33 first hostages to be released are dead, and that's what came true after the Hamas provided the list and said how many of them are dead, how many of them are alive. Unfortunately, 8 of them lost their lives while being in captivity.
I really want to look at the feeling still within Israel, and there has of course been division over this ceasefire deal. Is there anger now that it's being again brought up at the deaths of hostages, and of course it's a constant reminder in Israel of the October 7th attacks?
There's a lot of pain in Israel, a lot of pain for the high price we are paying for the release of the hostages and the release of many murderers from Israeli jails, and the fact that we know that eventually these people are going to practice terrorism again, and there are going to be more casualties because of this release. We know that, and we know that Hamas is at least temporarily going to stay in power in Gaza, which is something that is unacceptable and stands in contrast to the goals of the war from an Israeli point of view. So there's a lot of pain, but on the other hand, and of course the fact that some of those just are declared dead, which means that they were probably murdered by Hamas while in captivity, is another reminder of what kind of an enemy we are dealing with.
Professor...
But at the same time, everybody in Israel is very happy to see the hostages released, and the fact that we are going to have 6 more of them released towards the end of the week makes everybody happy.
Sorry for that brief interjection there, Yossi. We're also joined by Professor Rohan Gunaratne, who is a Middle East affairs expert, joining us from Singapore. Professor Gunaratne, moving now into Gaza, the UN have said that the support needed for the people returning to northern Gaza still remains, and the conditions that they're moving into. What do you think that the life is going to be like for the people returning to northern Gaza following the destruction of many of their homes?
Gaza is not habitable. In fact, there's large-scale destruction, and this destruction is because the IDF was hunting Hamas, and Hamas was using the human shield, and Hamas was unwilling to surrender. And even now, Hamas is playing the hostage game. They don't want to release the hostages. They want to release hostages stage by stage and keep some hostages with them, because Hamas believes that will guarantee the safety of Hamas. What is important is for Israel to do everything possible to seek the release of those hostages, but also in Israel's strategic calculus, Israel doesn't want Hamas to rule Gaza because there will be a persistent threat to Israel. So sooner or later, IDF will move into Gaza to fight Hamas again. So those Gazans who have returned back to their homes to makeshift tents, they themselves will have to move when the war starts again. That is the reality of Gaza and the reality of the hostages and the reality of Israel operations.
Professor Gunaratne, before any further fighting happens in the time between then, if that is to be the case, how is it possible for enough aid to get in to support those who need it? The UN have said it needs to be sustained, but the amount of money, the amount of resources that need to be pumped in, how is that possible?
There is significant resources that has now gone into Gaza. The international community, the UN, and many countries in the Gulf, they are supporting the humanitarian efforts. So I believe that there will be continuous assistance and support. There is no shortage of humanitarian assistance.
Finally, to end our discussion, Yossi Kapawasa, I want to focus on now the next steps and looking at it as your previous role within the IDF. What do you think those next steps are for the IDF in Gaza?
Well, it's less about the IDF, it's more about Israel. The policy of Israel is now to start to begin the negotiations about the second stage of the deal. And in this second stage, the quid pro quo is going to be either Hamas gives up the ruling of Gaza, and then the reconstruction effort can begin, or it stays in power and there's not going to be any reconstruction, because it makes no sense, not from the point of view of Israel, not from the point of view of the donors that are going to make sure that this reconstruction effort is possible, to invest in Gaza while Hamas is in power. That's the main issue. If Hamas insists on staying in power, then we might see another round of atrocities.
But Yossi, unless the unlikely case of Hamas laying down their arms and surrendering happens, do you think that further Israeli military action in Gaza is the only way forward?
No, we can put pressure short of military action, but the prospects of military action are going to rise considerably if there's not going to be any flexibility on the side of Hamas. And what Hamas is going to try to do is to make an appearance of giving up some of the capabilities to rule over Gaza, but staying in power nevertheless. And that's going to be the main issue in the next stage. How do we make sure that they really give up ruling Gaza?
Yossi Kapawasa, and also thank you to Professor Rohan Gunaratne for joining us. Tesla is set to unveil details on its new low-cost model aiming to boost deliveries by 30%. With competition rising, can the Cybertruck and updated Model Y drive growth? Here's the full report.
Investors have been eagerly awaiting more information on Tesla's new lower-priced model, which is expected to help the company meet its goal of increasing deliveries by up to 30% this year. Tesla's stock valuation has surged by over 60%, reaching an impressive $1.30 trillion following the election of President Donald Trump. However, Tesla has faced challenges in 2024, recording its first ever decline in annual deliveries. This has been attributed to fierce competition in China from rivals like BYD. To counter this, Tesla has relied heavily on the release of the Cybertruck and updates to the popular Model Y, though analysts point to limited growth potential from its existing US lineup. The introduction of the low-cost model has become even more crucial to Tesla's long-term growth, although analysts believe it may not fully meet the company's ambitious 20 to 30% annual growth targets. Concerns have also been raised about whether this new model will qualify for federal subsidies, potentially raising the cost for consumers. As Tesla navigates heightened competition, particularly in China, it has doubled down on AI-driven technologies like FSD and is exploring the potential of robotaxis. With plans to introduce lower-cost cars based on current platforms in the first half of 2025, Tesla is shifting its strategy from producing a completely new $25,000 vehicle. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Let's now take a look at some updates from across the Indo-Pacific region. Trump and Modi have discussed strengthening US-India ties, focusing on fair trade, defence and cooperation, also including immigration. They emphasised deepening security collaboration in the Indo-Pacific, Middle East and Europe. Trump pushed for India to increase its purchase of US security equipment, while both leaders committed to advancing the US-India strategic and Indo-Pacific Quad partnerships. Modi is set to visit the US in February. China will make physical education a core part of school curriculums to combat rising childhood obesity. Schools are required to treat PE teachers equally to other subject leaders like maths and English. Key sports such as soccer, basketball and volleyball will be emphasised, while the new policies also mandate 2 hours of daily physical activity for students. Doctors predict obesity will increase over the next decade due to economic slowdowns and lifestyle changes. China and India have agreed to facilitate the exchange of journalists between the two countries. China and India also agreed to continue cooperation on cross-border rivers and maintain communications by holding a new round of meetings at an early date. Moreover, China and India agreed to push for the resumption of pilgrimages by Indian pilgrims to Tibet's sacred mountains and lakes in 2025. Firefighters are working to control rapidly spreading fires in southeastern Australia, with thousands of acres burning in national parks. Lightning strikes ignited multiple blazes in Grampians National Park, located 300 kilometres from Melbourne. A separate fire in Little Desert National Park has consumed nearly 65,000 hectares in under a day. A farming community in the region has been evacuated due to the danger. India has confirmed a $450 million deal to export BrahMos missiles to Indonesia. It's reported that the deal is in the advanced stages, though it may take some time. The deal with Indonesia comes on the heels of a similar transaction with the Philippines. The BrahMos missile could enhance Indonesia's military capabilities and strengthen defence ties between the two nations. Police have detained a man suspected of involvement in the case of a Chinese actor who was duped into travelling to Thailand for a film job and then trafficked to Myanmar, China's Public Security Ministry have said. The joint efforts of the ministry's task force and the Chinese embassy in Thailand, helped by Thai law enforcement, led to the arrest of a major criminal suspect. The protests in Lebanon have taken a violent turn, with Israeli forces opening fire. The attack killed at least 2 people protesting against the delay of withdrawal of Israeli forces. The residents wish to return home as agreed in the terms of the ceasefire. Let's know more updates from the region in this report.
Israeli forces shot and killed at least 2 people and wounded 17 on the second day of deadly protests in southern Lebanon. This came as residents displaced by the 14-month war between Israel and Hezbollah attempted to return to villages where Israeli soldiers remain. Under a United States brokered ceasefire on November 27th, Israeli forces were to withdraw from southern Lebanon and Hezbollah was to move north by January 26th. While the Lebanese army and United Nations peacekeepers had already deployed in several villages before the deadline, Israeli forces remain in more than a dozen villages. The US and Lebanon announced on Sunday that the deadline to meet the ceasefire terms had been extended to February 18th, following which protests resumed on Monday, particularly in eastern and southern border villages, where residents again attempted to return home. A day prior, 24 people were killed and more than 130 were wounded when Israeli troops opened fire on protesters who breached roadblocks set up along the border. Mourners carrying Hezbollah flags and chanting slogans took part in the funeral of 3 Lebanese killed by Israeli forces along the border. Both sides have traded accusations for delays in the implementation of the deal. Israel blamed the Lebanese army for not deploying to the region fast enough, while the Lebanese military accused Israel of stalling its withdrawal, complicating its deployment efforts. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now for some news from the world of business. President Trump plans tariffs on copper and aluminium imports. Analysts warn this could increase costs for US consumers. The tariffs aim to boost domestic production of military materials. Trump said, "We have to bring production back to our country." Tariffs could add $1.5 billion to $2 billion to US costs, raising concerns over lower price promises. The Bank of Japan is expected to raise interest rates again by June or July. Former board member Makoto Sakurai predicts a target of at least 1.5% within 2 years. Strong wage growth and economic performance supports this move. Last week, the BOJ increased rates to 0.5%, the highest since 2008. Sakurai notes that if the economy performs as expected, rates may reach 0.75% by summer. Germany must tackle structural weakness to maintain AAA rating, says Scope Ratings. Executive Eiko Seivert cites weak GDP, high energy costs and a lack of investment as issues. The economy shrank again in 2024 due to weak exports and global demand. Germany's three-party coalition fell last year due to disagreements on economy recovery. February's snap election could influence recovery strategies. Global sales of electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles are projected to exceed 20 million in 2025. This marks a 17% increase, according to the RHO Motion. Iola Hughes, head of research at RHO, predicts growth in Europe. This will be driven by new CO2 emission targets and more affordable models. In China, sales could reach 12.9 million. Meanwhile, the US is expected to grow by 16%, reaching 2.1 million units. TravelPerk, a corporate travel platform, has raised $200 million in funding. This doubles its valuation to $2.7 billion. The Barcelona-based company also acquired Yokoi, a Swiss spend management platform. This acquisition will help TravelPerk expand into financial services. Jean-Christophe Tounet-Bakula, president and CEO of TravelPerk, noted that revenues have increased nearly fivefold since the pandemic lows. Distressed property sales in Hong Kong are impacting banks that were previously shielded from loan losses. Collier's International reports that nearly 40% of the 34 billion Hong Kong dollars in 2024 commercial real estate transactions were distressed. Credit analyst Karen Wu highlights growing concerns over bad loans. Goldman Sachs believes Hong Kong banks can weather a 35% price drop thanks to strong capital buffers. That's all we have for now, but we'll be continuing to bring you more of the latest international news.